On October 14, 2027, the People's Liberation Army launched a quarantine zone around Taiwan. No invasion fleet, no missile barrage on Taipei, just a thin line of Coast Guard cutters and declared exclusion zone for safety inspections. Music. The world's response didn't come with carrier groups. It came with a stock market circuit breaker. In the weeks that followed, the global automotive industry ground to a halt. Ford and Toyota idled plants from Kentucky to Aichi because a single $50 microcontroller was missing. Samsung and Apple announced indefinite delays on next-gen devices. The US F-35 program froze. Each jet requires thousands of chips, and the spares kit was empty. Music. TSMC declared force majeure, a legal term that means the most advanced factories on Earth are now behind a wall nobody can cross. The U.S. Strategic Semiconductor Reserve was tapped. It bought 3 weeks. Every fab in Arizona, Dresden, and Kumamoto is running flat out. The chips inside them are worth trillions, and none of it replaces what's missing, because one island understood something the rest of the world had been quietly ignoring. You don't need to fire a shot to paralyze the 21st century. You just need to turn off the lights in one clean room. The Taiwan Strait sits between mainland China and the island of Taiwan. At its narrowest, it's 80 miles across, roughly the distance from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. Through that gap passes roughly 90% of the world's advanced logic chips. The brains of every iPhone, every AI server, every modern missile, every electric vehicle. TSMC, a single company on a single island, manufactures the future. There is no meaningful alternative. Samsung and Intel are years behind on the bleeding edge. China's SMIC is blocked from the lithography tools it needs. Nobody built redundancy because for 30 years, the strait was just a shipping lane. Why spend hundreds of billions duplicating the most complex manufacturing ecosystem in human history when the status quo was so profitable? The U.S. military gets its guided munitions through this logic. China gets its smartphone processors through this logic. Europe's green transition runs on inverters and controllers made here, but chips are only part of it. The Strait carries 40% of global maritime trade, the raw materials for pharmaceuticals, the specialized chemicals for fertilizers, the high-purity quartz sand from North Carolina that feeds the furnaces in Hsinchu. The Taiwan Strait isn't a trade route. It's a civilization artery. A doctor in rural Kenya using a portable ultrasound, a farmer in Brazil driving a GPS-guided tractor, a soldier in Poland firing a Javelin missile. None of them have ever seen this water. None of them know TSMC exists. All of them depend on it staying open, all of it flowing through a gap one military can seal with music, a single order. Every government on Earth knows this. Every CEO has wargamed it, and nobody has done anything about it, because it turns out the modern world isn't built on supply chain resilience. It's built on a 40-year-old gamble. In 1987, TSMC was founded as a foundry for hire, a neutral fab for a globalized world. It worked. The logic was irresistible. Design in California, manufacture in Taiwan, assemble in China, sell everywhere. Efficiency became a religion. Redundancy became a sin. By the time the geopolitics curdled, the expertise had concentrated so deeply it couldn't be moved. Not easily, not quickly. The tacit knowledge, the recipe, lives in the heads of engineers in Hsinchu. You cannot evacuate a culture. What makes the geography so significant is this. The island doesn't just sit beside the strait. It is the strait's master. The best fabs sit on the western coast, mortar range from the mainland. You cannot defend a factory when the enemy sits on the hills overlooking the parking lot. For 40 years, the silicon shield was a theory. Taiwan is too valuable to attack, but shields only work if the attacker values the intact prize. A quarantine doesn't break the shield. It just freezes the asset. The most powerful navy on Earth is sitting 100 miles away. The U.S. 7th Fleet in Yokosuka, carrier strike groups, submarines. By any measure, a titan of the seas. When the quarantine hit, they moved immediately. But the Taiwan Strait isn't built for a navy like this. It's a shooting gallery. Land-based anti-ship ballistic missiles, DF-21s, DF-20XS. designed specifically to turn carriers into reefs, swarms of drone boats, mines laid by civilian ferries. Securing the lane takes months. Closing it takes an announcement. And even if they kept the water open, the fab still wouldn't run. Because the real lock on this door isn't military. It's the lack of spare parts. It's the specialized gases. It's the engineers who didn't show up for their shift because the blockaders control the power grid. The U.S. Navy can patrol the strait. It can escort every tanker through. But it cannot make a fab run without music, hydrofluoric acid, photoresist, and 5,000 PhDs who feel safe. There is no policy for business as usual under quarantine. The ships stop, the wafers stop, and the pressure to end this lands not on combatants, but on the hostages. Apple, NVIDIA, the Pentagon, the German auto industry. None of them fired a missile. None of them voted on this. But their futures are running on a clock. The global chip inventory, the emergency buffer, was always a just-in-time illusion. The world had enough to buy weeks, not quarters. On one side of the world, the most powerful navy in history was sailing circles in a bathtub, engines running, weapons ready, completely unable to fabricate a 3-nanometer transistor. On the other side, CEOs and generals with no ships, no territory, and no vote were watching their inventories drain and waiting for someone else to blink. Nobody had a move. Everyone needed one. At some point, it always reopens. China's economy runs on exporting electronics. China's electronics run on TSMC chips. The leverage works both ways. The quarantine lifts. The wafers move again. And almost immediately, the hard questions about how the world ended up this exposed get quietly set aside. Because fixing it costs $1 trillion in a decade and solves a problem that most of the time doesn't exist. When the strait is open, which it is a vast majority of the time, chips are cheap, AI booms. And spending that kind of money on a crisis that might not come for another generation is a very hard case to make to a quarterly budget. So the world keeps taking the cheaper option, which is trust that the clean room stays lit. The countries that hold leverage over the strait are not the countries that depend on it most. The countries that depend on it most have no territory here, no claim to the silicon, no practical way to change the physics. The strait has been a flashpoint for 70 years. Someone tries to own the island. Someone else tries to guarantee its freedom. And the future, trapped in the middle, just watches. The wafers move again. They always do. The geography doesn't.